So I want to welcome everyone to the Nurses Station. I'm Lawana. I'm one of the nurse faculty here at Regis College, and I have with me this morning Dame Claire Bertschinger. So I could give you a very long, 20-minute long synopsis of all the wonderful things that she has done. I will tell you that you need to, once you have watched this interview, go get this book, Moving Mountains. That's her name there, and it will give you some idea of a little bit of her story. But we are so pleased to have her with us this morning, and she is actually across the pond.
I'm in the UK.
Yes, it's lovely to have you.
And I'm delighted to be here. Thank you so much for asking. What a surprise.
Yes, we love, I was very surprised and very happy. And I will tell you, for those of us that remember in the 80s, and I remember very clearly the Live Aid and Band Aid concerts that came about. There were like huge humanitarian efforts. They came about because of the work that Dame Claire was doing at that time in Ethiopia for the Red Cross with the hunger camps that were there in Ethiopia at that time. So this work was monumental, life-saving work, and it kind of opened the eyes, the pictures from her, and there are pictures in the book as well, kind of opened the eyes of us to let us know that this thing that we heard about that was going on, we had no real concept of what hunger actually looked like. And we did not know that we could make a difference in that by what we were doing here in the Americas and in the UK at that time. So I will say that before we talk about that, I always kind of begin with, how did you get to be a nurse? I mean, the stories of people getting to be a nurse are so varied. So for you, where did it start?
It's something I'd always wanted to do. I remember bandaging my teddy bears and my dolls and just practicing first aid on anybody and everybody I could. And I just always knew in my heart that I wanted to be a nurse. It was just something stronger than, I started to be with the sort of Red Cross doing first aid, and just what I always wanted to be.
Wonderful. So at that time with studying, what was the pathway like for becoming a nurse educational wise in the UK at that time for you?
For me, it was disastrous.
Oh my goodness.
So I was bottom of the class. I wasn't only bottom of the class, I was put in what's called a remove class. Wow. Because I was I was no good at all. And I was near the bottom of that. And it was only, so I couldn't read or write until well in my teens. But I managed to just get the basic exams to be able to become a nurse. It was only when I was in my 20s that my mother was reading a women's magazine and learned about this new thing. Remember, this was in the 70s, called dyslexia. And I thought, dyslexia. And she explained what it was, and we read what it was. And I thought, I probably have got this thing called dyslexia. But I thought, well, I'm not going to tell anybody because I was too embarrassed. You know, all along I'd been sort of a dunce, so to speak. But so it wasn't until I was in my 40s and I wanted to do a master's degree in medical anthropology that I sort of came out as being dyslexic, because then I got extra time and I could use a computer.
Yes, amazing. Wow. So you were able to do that without the accommodations that you got later. So that's even more amazing. So was Ethiopia the first stop that you made when you started working with the Red Cross, or how did you get to that point there?
Well, I trained as a nurse. I specialized in accident emergency department, you call it. I did tropical nursing in my spare time as an extra curriculum. And I actually went on an expedition called Operation Rally and worked in Panama, Papua New Guinea and Sulawesi in Indonesia as a paramedic nurse in the tropical rainforest. So we slept in hammocks, cooked over wood fires, washed and drank from the river. It was very basic, and I loved it. I loved it. At least I could use my tropical medicine then. And I like a challenge. I give the best of myself when I'm faced with a challenge. So I did that. And then I applied to the Red Cross. The British Red Cross actually turned me down because I wasn't a midwife. And that particular time they wanted midwifery. And so I'm half Swiss, and I was visiting my aunt in Geneva, Switzerland. And she said, you should try something called the International Committee of the Red Cross. and they are the guardian of the Geneva Conventions and international humanitarian law, and they specialize in war zones. So in fact, with my experience of emergencies and tropical medicine, and I spoke some French, I was off, and my first place was in Lebanon during the Chouf Mountain Wars in 1983-84.
Wow. So what was nursing like? I mean, you're here in a life-saving role, but we all know war is not about that at all. So how was that experience of being the people trying to preserve life?
So my role was, I had to cross the front line to pick up the wounded, resupply the hospitals, give emergency first aid, and when necessary, pick up the wounded on the battlefield, because if they were in a no man's land, nobody else could go and pick them up. And I did this under the protection of the Red Cross. And you don't just fly in and cross the front line saying, you know, hey, me, I'm a big Red Cross woman. No, you have to arrange ceasefires. And these are done at a very high diplomatic level, whether it's New York, London, Paris, Beirut. And then we arrange ceasefires at a certain time. So then I arrive up to a front line. Now, front line at that particular time consisted, in any one day, I could cross the front lines between Israeli-held area to a Shiite Muslim area to a Sunni Muslim area, to the Druze militia area, to a Christian-held camp, and even to Palestinian camp. And each time you crossed the front line, you had to arrange ceasefires. And I remember going up to the front line, the first week, and I was really scared, because these fighters come out of their dugouts. They're covered in bullets and grenades, and they're dirty and they're tired, and I started talking to them about Red Cross and the work we were doing, and that we were completely neutral and we work on all sides. And really, I mean, as I said, I knew they had blood on their hands. I knew they'd killed and tortured people. And what I suddenly found was they started talking about their families, about their friends, and how they wanted peace. And we want peace, Claire, they said. We want peace. We're fighting peace. But those people over there you go and see next, they're the real baddies. They're the ones who raped my sister and burnt my house down. So eventually, the nice fighters, human beings, I managed to make a ceasefire, say between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. into the next fighting faction area across the no man's land. And what did I find with these so-called killers, that the other side, they were fighting for peace. We're not bad, Claire. We're good people. We want peace. I want my children to be able to go to school. We want to be able to have good hospitals and things. And I found this in every different fighting factions, who they were fighting. There was always, usually it was some sort of faith-based fighting.
Right.
And I just think there just has to be an alternative to war. Yeah. What is it? What is it?
Exactly. Having to see it up close like that, and then realizing, like you say, that they're human beings, on both sides. I can imagine that definitely touched a chord, because just hearing about it makes it seem that way. So to go from, and I'm going to read kind of as a segue, I love the statements on the back of your book here. And it says, one of the most enduring images of the Ethiopian famine that shocked the world in 1984 was that of a young International Red Cross nurse who, surrounded by thousands of starving people, had the terrible task of choosing which children to feed. And that was you. So to go from an area where folks were, in a sense, killing each other for different reasons, and now to be in a space where people were dying, what was that transition like for you?
It was shocking, but I was prepared in some way. It was still, Ethiopia at the time was a communist regime. There was internal conflict, and we had to be flown in to the place where we had the feeding center. So we still had a curfew, and it was still dangerous, but we were okay if we were in the town of Ekeli, we were at the time. But I do remember I had a feeding centre to start with 300, it went up to 500 children under the age of 5. Thousands more needed feeding. Right. And we just had insufficient food for them. We didn't have enough food for everybody. And I was just feeding the under 5s. And I can remember one day in particular that I had a space, I discharged some patients, some children, so I had a space for 50, 60 children to come in. And was thousands out there.
Right.
We didn't know what to do. In the end, we talking to my local helpers, or Red Cross helpers, they said, well, let's put them all in lines, get them to sit down, and then you could then go up and down the lines and choose the ones. And I said, oh, I can't do that. You must do it. It's not right for me. And they said, we can't do it. That's our family. That's our friends,
Wow.
cousins. So in the end, we discussed how I would choose, because it's an impossible task.
Exactly.
Absolutely. They were all, they just had skin. There was skin and bones just dripping off no muscle, just skin dripping off their bones. And so I just walked up and down the lines, and we took the ones that had a glint of light in their eyes, because the ones who were the worst we knew would die within the next 24 hours.
Right. Yeah.
And ones with a glint of light we knew would be able to feed them, because when they first get food, suddenly you go downhill. And we didn't have IV fluids or anything. We gave a milk drink at that time. So
yes, very difficult.
Yeah, it was very difficult. And I think also the thing is, you were so busy, you didn't have time to think.
Right.
So sun up to sunset, busy,
right. And that probably played to your advantage in some way, because had you had time to think, it might have, diminished the ability to do the work, because I can't imagine that it was emotionally such a drain there as well. Have you been able to revisit Ethiopia since that initial visit? And was it a different type of, closing the circle?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been back several times. I went back with Bob Geldof. I don't know if you know who Bob Geldof is.
Yes, Bob Geldof was the one who got started with Live Aid. Well, I think it was first Band Aid, and then went to Live Aid, which was able to raise so much money. I think it may have even been the biggest fundraising to this point in history that was able to be raised for that. Yes.
So it's my interview on the TV film that inspired him to set up Band Aid.
Yes.
And so I was asked to go back with Sir Bob Geldof, and it was absolutely wonderful. There's new roads, new universities, new hospitals, and I met some children who are adults. And that was just magical, absolutely magical.
Wow.
So that's wonderful. But I have to say now that in the last 18 months, 2 years, suddenly there's internal conflict again.
Wow.
And whereas part of the royalties of my book goes to the African Children's Education Trust, so we were building schools. And just in the last 18 months, because of the internal conflict, it's absolutely terrible there now. Wow. And so much has been destroyed, and it's very difficult to have contact. There's no real contact with our friends, our family out there, which not even email or phone.
Yeah, it's difficult.
In this particular area, if you're in Addis Ababa, the main capital, of course, that's a bit easier, but it's in this particular Tigray area. But I saw how it had moved from nothing to these wonderful hospitals and universities and roads and industries. And my children, the children had got
your children,
and who, they got jobs but we were really worried, because under 5 years old, if they're malnourished for any length of time, that there would be cognitive impairments, but they managed to get good degrees, and doctors and solicitors and IT people and mechanics, wonderful. Yeah.
Right. That is so amazing. And it's sad to know that there's been some decline, there. And I think that sometimes when we haven't visited or been in those areas physically, we don't feel what that feels like. We just assume that everybody has the advantages that we may have, even when it comes to nursing and being able to nurse there, but not having the resources you were trained to use, and now having to use that without. That kind of brings me to where we are now with the pandemic and with COVID, and just a little taste of what that was like. What was your experience of that in the UK? I know here in the US, I don't work in bedside. I do patient care in a clinic. And so, initially it was like COVID, it's going to be the flu. It'll be here, it'll be gone. And so what were your thoughts when you first heard about it yourself?
Well, I work at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. So we have the top researchers there. We could see it coming.
Wow.
We could see what was happening. And we realized we would have to be, and the top professors and nurses are part of the World Health Organization. And they came and told us we are going to have to lock down a month before we were going to. I'm not bedside at all. I'm not clinical at all. I'm just academic. Oh gosh, I could tell you something controversial if you really like. Would you like that?
I would love,
Well,
you know,
anyway,
we as nurses, don't we just love controversy? That's what that's what our whole job is about. We just don't tell folks.
Okay. So the government decided to set up hubs completely set aside in conference centres. They were called Nightingale hospitals, and they refurbished them completely with 200, 300, 400 bedded units to set up and look after the patients. And this was a complete white elephant. I don't know if you use that expression. It was ridiculous because there was nobody to staff them. They spent thousands, if not millions of dollars setting them up. And they didn't have the staff. If somebody did have COVID, they had to be taken there in an ambulance or somewhere. There wasn't ambulances for that. And so I'll tell you what you need to do in the future, okay?
Good, because I was going to say, you know how to manage a crisis.
Yes, in a crisis, because we were locked down, right? So outside every hospital, there was either an empty car park or an empty park of road. And what you do is you set up a hospital, which is linked, a military style hospital, which is linked to the hospital, the same staff, the same doctors. You can set that up under in inverted commas, a tent. Yes. And that's what they need to do. Every major hospital, you set up 2 or 3 extra intensive care beds.
Right. Almost like a field hospital attached to the actual hospital.
And then you've got all the resources on site, and it's much less, everything's there. Nurses,
you're exactly right. When all this was going on here with testing, I told my husband, I said, listen, they need to let the nurses and the military. I said, the nurses in the military, we can tell you how to get everybody tested, how all the things. I said, because we're used to managing with not as many people, and the military is used to managing a big, amount of things. And so, it's amazing.
But so I was teaching. I run the diploma in tropical nursing at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. And I was teaching at the time, and my students came part-time 1 day a week to London on a Wednesday for the course, 65 students. It made it limited to very European or English, although I did have some American or Australians that came through. But within 3 days, lockdown was on the Sunday. I had the course continuing to run on the Wednesday. And within 3 days, I went on Zoom. I didn't even know what Zoom was.
I know, isn't that something?
Goodness me. But within 3 days, I went on Zoom. And what's the most amazing thing is that it is wonderful now, because now my courses run online and I'm touching the world. So I can touch the people who I really want to touch in Kenya, in Gambia, in Uganda, in India, Pakistan, so rather than us Westerners or white people or whatever is flying in to help, which actually, unless you've been trained, you wouldn't know. You don't know with no running water. So I'm touching the people who really need to be supported, so they can help them to help themselves, and that's the way forward in this world. And that's a positive that's come out of COVID.
Yeah, I love the fact that connectiveness has come out of COVID. And it's funny because Andy was asking me, he's like, well, what's the difference in tropical medicine? I said, what I can tell you is that I'm a nurse in America. I know how to treat diarrhea. I don't know anything about cholera. I said, I have no idea what to do. I said, so I can tell you that there are certain diseases that are only found in, more certain areas, and that you need to know what you're doing rather than just, flying over there and saying you're going to help, because you really have to be educated. So I'm so glad to think, because I didn't think about the fact that now you can actually reach them through Zoom. Zoom is here to stay. We're going to be Zooming for the rest of our lives, which is wonderful. And it's allowed us to be able to talk. So that's great too, to be able to do that. So, as far as the nursing, I know here in the US, what we've seen happen is that there has been a mass exodus of folks leaving bedside care. We've had some that have retired nurses. We have nurses that are going into professions that are not bedside, advanced practice. And so it's left us with more of a shortage, really, for the true bedside nurses. What does it look like from your side in the UK as far as nursing?
Terrible. we have a real, yes, exit of nurses, the same thing, because they've completely burnt out from all the hours and extra days they've had to do. We've also had something called Brexit, which means the Britain has come out of the European market, and it's dreadful. And means that nurses are not necessarily recognised from Europe.
Oh my goodness.
Which is, or they have to be specially registered. It's terrible.
Wow.
And so whereas European, we could travel in Europe and work anywhere. We can't do that now, or nobody can come. So a lot of people, and they felt unwelcome to come to Britain. I mean, of course, I mean, Europe is a bit like America, you know, you've got your states, we've got different countries, you know, but now they can't. Do you have to be registered in different states? Or
here you have to be registered in different states, but there are certain states that are grouped together. Like the state I'm in, South Carolina, is like in a compact. So there's like 13 states. So my license will allow me to work in multiple states, but the state I teach in is Boston. I mean, it's Massachusetts. So I had to get a separate license for that. It's only 50 states, and we still can't all come together and decide on one thing for everybody to be able to work. Hopefully we'll get there at some point. You know, for advanced practice nurses like me, it's even harder because, you know, you're not really recognized across, it's just the RN. So I could go work in the hospital, but I couldn't go do anything advanced practice. You'd have to have a different kind of agreement. And it's just really a lot more complex than it needs to be, you know. If we could standardize it, it would be helpful, because then nurses would be able to work everywhere. And we really do want to be able to work, you know, in other places.
We had standardized it. Before we came out of it was voted that we come out of it, we had standardized it so we would be recognized. Right. Anyway.
Yeah, it is. And it's all at a political level that's kind of, I think, driven by money in a lot of ways. And that's really unfortunate because, you know, there are certain things that humans should have regardless of where they live. You know, your zip code shouldn't determine how long you get to live. And that always boggles my mind, that you can live in a certain area and simply because of living there, you're not going to live as long, you know? Yeah. So that makes us sad, you know, it does. So I don't know. I think we have a lot to work on when it comes to nursing shortage. I don't know where these nurses are going to come from. I mean, I'm like in my 50s and I'm trying to get to the 60s, 70s so I can go sit down somewhere and not, you know.
If you don't tell anybody, I'll tell you a secret.
Okay. All right.
I've been a nursing 50 years.
50 years. That's amazing. Oh, I love it. And you know what I love? I was looking, and I try not to really research people that I talk to because I love just hearing the organic story. What I was researching, though, one thing, and I saw that you were named by Scrubs magazine among the top 10 influential nurses in history. And I was like, everybody on this list is like in a textbook, like Sanders and Dorothea Dix. And I'm like, this is just amazing. But the work that you did and are doing is just so phenomenal. It really is. It really is. So do you enjoy the teaching as much as you did the field work?
I love the teaching. I absolutely love it, because before the field work, you're working one-to-one or a small group, right? And helping people to move on. Now I'm teaching 130 students a year from around the world, and each one of those students is going to spread it on to another 100. So I'm really using my life experience and my knowledge to pass it on to so many more people.
That's amazing. That
and the young, you know, the young. I think it's important that they not only know the academic side of care, but they know, for instance, you mentioned cholera, what to do in cholera epidemic when you've got no running water, no electricity, and no antibiotics. Can you survive? What's going to happen? And I can say, well, actually, this actually happened to me, and this is give the example.
Perfect. It is. And you know, Regis was, of course, it's a Catholic university, so it was founded by the sisters, and a part of our mission is the care of the dear neighbor, you know, so that plays into what we do have students here that are from different countries, and we do mission work in Haiti. And I'm even thinking that we may need to be talking about trying to get a course in tropical medicine added to our curriculum, because we have students that are from all over the world, and it would be wonderful. So I do think that you're going to have to give me your mailing address and all your contact information, so that, plus you're my first like European friend and a nurse. And I mean, I can only go up from here because you're at the top of the heap. Really.
Well,
if
you Google my name, you'll find my
your contact. Okay,
all my
wonderful.
details there.
Wonderful.
Yes, no, absolutely. I quite agree.
It's amazing. I would love to do that. So as far as, where we're going medicine wise, is there something that makes you hopeful when you think about the future, about nursing, about what the work that you've done and the work we're continuing to do in taking care of each other? What gives you hope when you think, I mean, there's so much here to make us not be hopeful, but what gives you hope, Dame Claire?
What gives me hope? Just trying to educate more and more people.
Mm-hmm.
It's difficult to say what gives me hope. More nurses. We need more nurses.
Right.
I think we also have to think about the basic of nursing, going back to Florence Nightingale. She was right. Fresh water, good food, hygiene, or even clean beds, beds so far apart. I mean, our wonderful sterile hospitals we have, they are the basic. Yeah, we've got antibiotics and we've got intravenous fluids and these wonderful dressings, all with different mixtures and potions on them. But the basic, I don't know about you, but when we had COVID, we were suddenly teaching the public how to wash their hands.
How to wash your hands. There you go.
We just had to sing happy birthday twice. What did you do?
That's it, Yeah.
So, and it is going back to basics, washing your hands. So simple. And diarrheal rates just plummeted. It really was fantastic.
Yeah, and it's something because we were not washing our hands, things like that. And I think you're right. The back to basics, we have a lot of things, technology things that are added, but the basic principles of nursing, the competence and the caring, that combination of not only knowing what you know, but also having the patient know that you care is so much there. And I was saying to Andy, I said, when I look at her pictures when she's younger, and I looked at one video that she was on, I said, though things have changed, I said, her eyes are still so inviting. And even talking to you now, I said, her eyes just have that care oozing from them. And that has not changed. And so we are so very blessed to have been able to talk to you and to just even know the work that you've done, the work that you're continuing to do. You'll be a nurse. I mean, nurses don't die, we don't stop. We don't really retire. We're always going to be doing something in the way of caring in the community. I mean, like I told my husband, I'll be at the old folks home and I'll be passing out my medicine and I'll roll down to my room on the end because it's just a part of who we are. It really is. So we're so glad. It's been my pleasure and my honor to speak with you. And I do hope that there are good new things on the horizon. It gives me hope to know we have educators like you that not just are teaching from the books, but teaching from the soul. And we thank you so much, Dame Claire, for joining us.
It's been a joy. I was really wondering what it was going to be like, but actually it's a great joy to meet you, Laura.
Oh, wonderful.
Fantastic. I've seen some of your other videos.
Thank
Wonderful.
you.
Excellent.
I appreciate it so much.